So I got up on the top of the roof, and I'm looking around, and I'm thinking, God, I wonder what side I should go off of.
You can do it, my son!
I just looked around, and I went, well, I guess this is it.
Go!
As I was coming down, my left leg hit the railing on the deck, and it flipped me over, and so when I landed flat on my back, and it knocked the wind out of me.
God's children have wings, Jim.
So I was just laying there, just going, shit, that didn't work at all. So I'm just laying there, and I said, well, maybe, and I started thinking, well, maybe I got rid of those voices finally, I said, this must have done it.
Still here, Jim? You screwed up twice now, Jimmy. How do you explain yourself, Jim?
Jim, I think he needs a rest.
But only till tomorrow. Till tomorrow. Freight train. Tracks nearby. Freight train. Freight
Be
train.
decisive, Jim. A freight train.
Freight train.
So it's a freight train, eh?
Take the freight train.
Choo-choo.
The tracks. The
Rest
tracks.
now, Jim, until tomorrow.
3 and you're out, dude. Go for it.
Freight train.
Finally, my roommate came home, and I told him, I was like, yeah, I said, yeah, I just dove off the roof about, 3 hours ago, and I'm all screwed up.
It was a result of that hospitalization where he sustained, I believe, a back injury, that they got him over to the University of Washington, and he started getting some help for his schizophrenia. We just saw a phenomenal change, that he was able to control parts of his life that previously had been totally out of control. And at the same time, I was trying to help Jim learn more about gardening and horticulture, because I felt that if worst came to worst, he would always be able to fall back on that as a way to support himself. Look at this clematis that you planted for me. Boy, that has just been great.
It's taken off.
Yeah.
The Jim I know now is a Jim that's had a job for 10 years. He goes to work every day. He does landscaping on the side. He's got lots of energy. He loves to ski and mountain bike, and he's married and he's got himself a nice home, and that's living.
Nothing's come that easy to me. It was just a lot of work and just keeping at it, and just one small step at a time, and then just you take little baby steps, and suddenly you've reached a pretty big goal. This whole front yard was just grass and weeds. I mean, it was like even buying my house. That was a huge accomplishment for me, and people were amazed at that. This landscaping in here.
Who knows what absolute personal hell he lived in? None of us can know that.
Then my newest thing I'm doing is I'm building this deck, and right now I'm working on putting in the plumbing and the electricity. I'm like everybody else that has schizophrenia. I mean, I would like to be cured at some point in my life, or as I would certainly hope to be. I don't know if it can be done, because the mind is one of the, I guess, probably the most complicated of all. But I hope for maybe for more research to go into schizophrenia and other mental illnesses, and I even thought long term, maybe after I get my own stuff pretty well taken care of, that maybe even I would like to contribute, maybe helping with fundraising or getting the word out that, hey, you can have a good life with schizophrenia.
I think what we can learn from Dan is that there's a person behind the illness. You look at him objectively and you see somebody that's a little bit disheveled, kind of walks with a tilt, is verbose and loud, and I think right then 80% of the population stops paying attention. But when you sit down with Dan and start to talk with him, you find a very personable, gentle, kind being that needs to be able to talk to individuals and share his ideas.
Early parts of my teenage years were very normal, Bob.
Were you real popular in high school and so forth? Ladies' man?
I never preferred myself as a ladies' man, Bob. However, I was a very popular individual in high school, and I turned out to be the valedictorian of my high school class.
Oh, did you? That's what I was going to ask you. So you're a real good student.
Excellent
Obviously.
student.
Yeah.
Excellent
Yeah.
student.
Yeah. So what happened? You graduated from high school and then on off to college, I guess, huh?
With one footnote, important footnote for what might come up in the sequel. And that is my relationship to our salutatorian, a certain girl named Joan. She may come up in the course of this film later on. We will wait and see where we go.
Okay, so what
But
happened?
in the event that she doesn't, we will drop this here. If she does, we have laid the correct foundation for including her at this most, relatively speaking, to schizophrenia, happy juncture in my life.
Okay,
Okay?
super. Let's move forward in time a little bit. Valedictorian, bright student, what next? Off to college?
Fortunately, not knowing where the wherewithal to fund my college education would come from, I wound up just in time receiving a full-ride General Motors scholarship to Western Michigan University to support my undergraduate education.
Fantastic.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, it sure is. So you went straight through college?
I went straight through, yes.
And-
Getting a little computer experience at the very end of it, by the way. And romancing Joan at the very end.
Here she comes again, right? Did Joan also go to Western Michigan?
Joan went to Kalamazoo.
She went there.
I went to Western.
Got it. Now, did you continue to be a real good... What?
Joan? No, I'm beginning to get old heart palpitations again, Bob.
Are you?
No, I'm just kidding you.
I think Joan's going to come up a lot.
No, she'll fade out.
She'll fade out.
I promise you she will fade out.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. So you're a good student in college, too?
Yes. Summa cum laude.
Really?
3.76 out of 4 point, grade point
Really?
average, point one.
Yeah.
And that would have been higher, except with Joan being in the picture all of a sudden, my senior year, my grades plummeted. All the way from 3.95 or so down to a miserable 3.76.
I first met Dan when he was admitted to the university psychiatric hospital, and I was a nurse on the unit that he was admitted to. He'd already obtained his PhD and been diagnosed as schizophrenic.
When I first met him, he was a professor in the math department, teaching, doing pretty well, had a really promising career, and at the time it was starting to fall apart.
Between 1978 and the early 1980s, I saw him admitted numerous times, and very delusional, very suspicious, very paranoid.
You got your PhD, and at a certain point thereafter, it did become necessary for you to be medicated on a more regular basis, is that right? What were the
Hold
kinds?
it, there's another girl.
Okay, another girl.
Another immature relationship with her. Who knows how these things work? I am no expert on this.
Sure.
I'm still raising questions as to what relevance the women had. But they certainly did have some. What we're basically running into is a case of one form of disturbance or another that eventually turned out to be schizophrenia in the most florid form possible, as I have just outlined to you, ever since the fall of 1964.
So you've had schizophrenia for 30...
In effect, for 32 years. Isn't that amazing?
He lives on his own. He has regular contact with the mental health system, but he does that on his own. He's not on commitment now, which means that he's at least participating in the program, has enough insight to go in and get his shots.
The real source of the pain comes in delusions, hallucinations, or just downright perverse persistence of thought.
The Wesley House is a great place. They allow a lot of people to come there. They run a free medical clinic. They let the mentally ill in and out. And Dan actually uses that as a staging post for himself. He goes there, he gets his messages, and they let him use that room. And when he's doing very well or very poorly, you can find him there for hours, pacing back and forth. Doesn't really interact with anybody, doesn't bother anybody. He just paces in a trance back and forth. And he says it centers him. It's a safe haven for him and a place he can go to get away from the things that are bothering him outside.
When we were talking before, you said that living with schizophrenia is a really hard job.
Right now, I'm a little out of shape. However, not completely. One is never out of the woods as far as schizophrenia is concerned. Once you have it, you're stuck with it for the rest of your life. The major feature of the problem since that time has been the related financial ramifications dating from 1964, essentially offshoots of the fact that at that time I first lost my citizenship. Gone through one peregrination or another in terms of my effort to get away from that particular kind of thing and at least become gainfully employed again so that I can possibly get away from all this dependence on such things as assisted housing, Social Security support for my income, which is a very meager amount of support, I might add, and most importantly, payment on the part of Medicare and Medicaid for my health insurance. We are not out of the woods with it by any stretch of the imagination. What we had planned to do 6 months from now is to start a tentative program, say, of how do I want to put this? Self-employment as a consultant.
I think that in America, we are what we do. I'm not Frank, a father of three and a guy who's just trying to make it. I'm Frank, the psych nurse. And the first thing you tell somebody at a cocktail party is usually, your name and what you do. And that's how we classify and categorize each other. When you're a schizophrenic and unemployed, you don't have the benefit of that. It's extremely important that regardless of whether he gets SSI and some sort of financial support, that he's also able to identify himself as working and an active participant in society.
Thanks a lot, Owen. If one is to be successful in combating as best he can this illness, in my considered professional judgment, after something like 32 years having dealt with it, to have aforehand convinced himself of his own intrinsic dignity despite this illness, and to live as best he can in respect to that particular promise to himself. I can't put it any more strongly. A promise to oneself, one's better self, or to one's higher power, or whatever, however else one wishes to characterize it. It takes that kind of dedication, period.
It occurred to me, it's almost as though having schizophrenia is like being in a war.
It is a war. I am not a coward by any stretch of the imagination. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come this far without having committed suicide a long time ago. It is a combination of being a war and a full-time job to cope with the illness. The voices, oftentimes they're loud, but I've ignored them. They'll always be there. They must be ignored totally if an individual is to survive the illness. That's it in a nutshell. That is my credo right there. Yeah.
Can I tell you something?
Sure.
I think you're very courageous.
Thank you. I've been telling myself that for years and years and years, but as courageous as I have been, Bob, because I cannot predict the future, I do not know how much more courageous I'm going to have to be, and therefore I don't concentrate on my own courage. I just step along from one day to the next day to the next day, praying one hell of a lot as I go, for the strength to continue the struggle against this insidious scourge.